Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. And my very first guest is the writer and director Tommy Swerdlow, who is perhaps best known for his work as the screenplay writer of the hit film Cool Runnings, about the Jamaican bobsled team. And I met him many years after, when I became a producer on his directorial debut, which is called A Thousand Junkies, and is a dark and funny chronicle of his life in Los Angeles during the height of his 20-plus year addiction to heroin. An addiction he miraculously survived and is perhaps better for the experience. After listening to this conversation, you can be the judge. He just finished writing The GRINCH, which is the latest iteration of the Dr. Seuss classic. It comes out this November. Here he is, Tommy Swerdlow.
I'll give you my version. I don't know. I'm not.
Right, no, your version's going to be a little angrier, maybe.
No,
a little more resentful.
No, I don't think
a little more.
I don't think it'll be anything like that.
Yeah, maybe.
You want to hear it?
Yeah, okay. Tommy
should I
Swerdlow.
just give it?
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Tommy Swerdlow. I am an alcoholic. I'm an addict, but I say I'm an alcoholic. Anyway, my story is basically that from the time I remember being a kid, I was just drawn to sort of troublesome activities. I like to light matches, set fires, break windows, steal bicycles. I was a little bit of a juvenile delinquent. I grew up in Long Island, and I was, my parents, I like to say this, I always say, my mother was a very, not prominent, I don't know if that's the right word, but a big anti-Vietnam War activist and co-founder of a very well-known movement named called Women's Strike for Peace, and we had medical supplies for the Viet Cong in the downstairs closet to be sent to the Viet Cong. I said at her memorial, when your parents are aiding and abetting your nation's enemy, you really have to step outside the box to rebel.
Wow.
So I stepped outside the box, you know what I mean, and got the police to the house. But I just wanted to get out of myself. And I'm born in 1962. I'm the youngest by 8 years. And my brother was my hero. He's since passed away, but he was my hero. And he was Stony. You know, he was 16, taking mescaline. He was an athlete at first. And I started smoking pot very early. And I just loved the idea of smoking pot. I loved the idea of getting out of myself. I liked when I was 6, I liked getting girls naked, boys naked. I didn't care. I just wanted to make trouble my whole life. I just wanted to make trouble. That's the truth. And then when I got sent to this boarding school, like a half-reformed boarding school when I was 12 and a half, got sent away, and because of stealing candy or something. I don't know. It's just trouble. And at 14, I came back to New York City. My folks moved to the city, and I really found pot in earnest, and I became a pot dealer, stoner, very stony kid. And a funny thing is, I don't know if people know it or not, but there's a play called This Is Our Youth that my friend Kenny Lonergan wrote, or about me and this kid Claude Seaman, where I'm this pot dealer. So, I mean, it became my identity. Sort of, I had this collection of pot, but I really found drugs to be not just something that took me out of myself and my anxiety and my feeling of lack of love and struggling with my mom. Me and my mom had a very contentious relationship, but it gave me like a purpose almost, or an identity. Anyway, I do that for a while. I start smoking coke when I'm 19 and 18, freebasing back when there was freebase, making real trouble. I tried heroin a couple of times, and then I decided I want to be an actor, and I come to Los Angeles, and I decide to be an actor, and I'm an actor, and I'm pretty successful at it. You know, I whatever, and I get married, and I'm still smoking weed, and then I get divorced, and I meet my second wife, and she's like smoking heroin sometimes. And we just start smoking heroin together. It takes about a year. And I become just full on strung out. And I give up acting and I just become a junkie poet. And I go on a 20-year dope run, a 20-year intravenous heroin habit where I'm just a full on junkie. You know what I mean? And I'm working. I become a screenwriter too. I have this weird thing happen where I write this movie that gets successful called Cool Runnings in the middle of it while I'm strung out. And they just start throwing money at me to write these family movies, like Little Giants, like kids movies. And I'm strung out on dope. I have this partner who's kind of fronting for me. And I've got this insane life where I've got money to use and I'm using, man. And it's gnarly. And I go to 20 rehabs. I can't get clean. I mean, I can't get a day. I won't kick. I've got options and I refuse to detox. I won't let myself be in pain. I'm stubborn. I'm willful and I get fat and I get strung out and I look like a pasty raccoon and I'm walking but I'm having, I mean, I don't know if I looked like that when I was working with like Steven Spielberg, but maybe I did. I have no idea. It was just insanity. And then basically, so all this happens. I can't, and I go to meetings, I go to rehabs. I can't get a day. I won't stop. And people are looking at me like, what is wrong with this dude? You know, like people in AA. And then in 2007, I get really sick. I do a shot that goes to my heart. I get a heart valve infection. I get 106 fever. This is the height of sort of heroin delusion to me. I've got 106 fever at certain points when it spikes. And I still think I'm like somehow dope sick. And I should just, if I shoot drugs, I'll feel better. And then I finally like go to the hospital because I'm vomiting and I've got 105 fever for a week. And the woman in there goes, I never forget this. She says to me, they finally do an echocardiogram. And she says to me, Tommy, you're a very, 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 very sick man. And I was like, okay, you have endocarditis. You have a heart valve infection and your heart is literally, your valve, your pulmonary valve is literally, aortic valve, the key one, is literally blown apart kind of by the Pseudomonas infection. And you need open heart surgery or you're going to die. And I don't even know if we can get you. Like you're in trouble, man. Like you're as sick as you can be. So I'm like, oh fuck. So anyway, you know, I'm like, oh, I didn't get away with this. I'm thinking I got away with all this drug use. You know what I mean? Even though I'm like sawing at my leg to break abscesses, I'm thinking I've got it together. You know what I mean? And to pop, you know, anyway, it's so dark. So I get in there. I'm in Cedar. So I go on these intravenous antibiotics for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I get the open heart surgery. It's unbelievably brutal because I've got such a big drug habit that they can't really medicate me. Or they'll kill me the amount I need. So I'm basically just screaming. Like they sawed my chest in half with a saw, and then I'm just screaming, man. Like a kind of pain I can't even express to you. So so I get out. 9 days later, they take me out of intensive care, I mean. And like I'm on Dilaudid, they're trying to give me drugs. I'm so out of it. They give me that stuff Michael Jackson took, propofol, which is like this insane drug. And I think I'm in like the tall grass in Vietnam. Like I'm just out hallucinating. I get out of intensive care, and the minute I get out, I eat a kosher meal of spaghetti and meat sauce. Somehow get it down, and I start to bleed internally. And I have a bleeding ulcer, and it won't stop. And I'm start to get overcome with like a hysteria. And it's like people say it's a white light when you're going to die. I'm having the opposite of it. I'm having a black light. And I'm hysterical. And I'm pleading with these people to just knock me out. And they knock me out and I bleed. I wasn't awake for it for 36 hours internally, and they can't stop it. This guy can't clamp it. He actually damages me. Then some woman heroically comes in and stops it. I was given 14 units of blood, twice as much blood as you have in your body over 36 hours in transfusions. They do some emergency duodenum surgery on me. They save me. I end up 66 days in Cedar-Sinai. And And I come out and I'm convinced my life is over. I'm like, oh, you ruined your life. You ruined everything. Like, you had everything and you destroyed it, and you are going to have a cripple's life for the rest of your life. Turns out, and for at end, I'm on 180 milligrams of methadone, like, to just be functional. And then I start going to AA meetings. And then, I somehow, I'm sleeping a lot, but I start going to meetings because I've been to meetings and I have people who care about me. And over 4 years, I get off 180 milligrams of methadone going to meetings, which people don't like. People don't like it when you're in programming on methadone. But I was, and I was honest to some people and whatever, But I did it. And then I went and kicked it Brotman the last 5 milligrams. And I slowly sort of came back to the world. You know what I mean? I mean, methadone is its own insane drug. All I can say about methadone is I had so the part of the story that I didn't tell is, I guess I'll tell it because it's gnarly, and I guess this is fun because it's a radio podcast, I had bad veins. So I ran out of veins and I started shooting in my shin, and I developed a large open wound in my shin from shooting at it that I could actually shoot up in. So I would shoot up in an open wound in my shin for 8 years. And I had this bandaged giant, like 4 inches, from top to bottom, a giant, and I have a scar, my shin is like missing. And a couple of times I would wake up and ants would be swarming it, who would come from the bathroom, like the Amazon jungle. And they would like eat it clean. They would like save it. It was like leeches, Anyway, that's where I'd gotten to, where I would wake up on, in what is, in Hancock Park in Larchmont, in a nice house with ants swarming a giant wound on my leg. Anyway, that's where my life got to. I got off this methadone, and I got slowly my life came back and my body came back, and now I go to Pilates 4 times a week. It's 10 years ago. It was 2007. It took a while, and I went through some struggles, man. I mean, I went through some real struggles. Like, it's really true what they say about the emotional stunting. Like, I was faced with myself when I got clean, and like, and I had this successful screenwriting career, to some level. I mean, and I couldn't make a living. I couldn't get a job, and I ended up making a movie produced by the person sitting across from me at the end, who came in and saved it, that really had a lot to do with it, called A Thousand Junkies, about being a drug addict, sort of the pathetic nature of it. It was kind of an original take. And I did it with 2 other addicts, a friend of mine. One of the kids tragically relapsed and died. Was clean when we started, named Blake Heron. And that was a big thing for me, sort of to take the darkness and the horror of it and go back in there and do something with it and make it to art and be clean enough to present that. So that was a big moment for me that happened over the last 5 years. And now I'm sort of got a little bit of work back and my physical health back. And it's kind of an incredible comeback story, in a way. It's funny. I don't think of myself as a disastrous person. It almost seems like, what was that? How did I get there? Like, how could I even go to that place? You know what I mean? And also, how did I get out of it? But that's what it was. And I was really, seriously, from like 1988 to 2007 was deeply compromised by addiction. Just really, it was the total story of my life. Everything else, there was other stuff going on, but the habit came first, which is the way heroin habit specifically, I'm sure alcoholism too. So I feel kind of crazy, grateful, and kind of crazy. I mean, I feel it's hard. Other people see me, like I'll hear other people go, Jesus, what a story, and I'll get it. For me, it's my life. So I don't even feel that different really internally, but I can tell I am. And I don't know, I feel like it was I know something. There was some kind of incredible blessing, all the the facing death, just the depth of the descent, not to be classic about it, but sort of hero's journey style. I mean, to truly go into the pit and somehow get back out. I do feel sort of blessed with a kind of perspective that I know I never would have had. When I came out here as an actor, I got leads in movies that fell through, where I would beat out like Robert Downey Jr., Tim Robbins, all these people. And the movies would always fall through. And I realized if I had become a movie star at 25 or gotten leads in movies, I would have been such an asshole. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I'm arrogant to start with and a snob and superior. But this has tempered it. You know what I mean? And at least I am aware of what an asshole I am.
I wonder, do you think, I think that's like 15 minutes, which is great. That's perfect. That's amazing. And I'm so glad to actually like, this is, this is the first one. So It's like, what is it going to be? And like, as long as I've known you, which has now been like, what, 4 years?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I've never heard this whole story. So it's kind of, and one, I've heard bits and pieces of it, but to put it into a narrative where I'm like, oh, I kind of get it, is great to hear. I wonder, like, if you had gotten one of those roles, right? And you became Robert Downey Jr. I mean, was the same path inevitable,
Probably worse. Yeah. I mean, I mean, it's, it's also, yes, I think I wouldn't have been able to handle that. And I think that's probably why maybe it didn't happen. And also, I think of being really lucky, just take it away from addiction, to the fact that, I was a writer, you know what I mean? And I would have, and it was like, I had a real reason for being, and like, I had a friend named Chris Rydell, who was Mark Rydell's son, and he told me his dad said, a lot of people can act, a few can direct, nobody can write. Right. So I don't mean that like I can write, no, I just mean like acting is something a lot of people can do. I mean, I don't think Robert Downey, I mean, those people are crazy talented, but I can do it. I'm sure I could have done it, but it was like I was protected from both the early success and the career choice, because like I found out with writing family movies, you know what I mean? Like when people start throwing money at you, it's hard to say no.
Did you, in that period, like between recovery and success,
but you mean recent success?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you worry that like it was never going to come back? Like you were never going to come, sort of like, I mean, like I knew you in that period, and like you were healthy. Like we played tennis all the time, and like you're doing shit. And
well, that you caught me when at least I was like had the movie and I had taken some action.
Right. But
the financial, like the amount of no that I got for a period in terms of sort of going, hey, I had this, I can do this thing. I know how to do this. I wrote, I wrote this movie everybody loves. Isn't that worth something? Come on, give me a fucking break. And people were like, we don't give a shit, dude. We don't care. Like, and it would just ended up being so much no, and I would get close, or someone would hire me for a little this or a little that, and I did things that were cheap, but I just couldn't make a living, to tell you the truth. Yeah. I couldn't make money. And it was humbling, and it was, and I struggled, man, and I struggled with feeling like a loser and like a piece of shit and all that stuff.
And you made this movie, and like, to me, I talk about the movie a lot, A Thousand Junkies, because like it to me is like the quintessential act of recovery. It is like, it's an act of faith, to just, I'm going to fucking start to cry. This is crazy. I don't know what the hell's happening to me. Sorry, the podcast host is not supposed to cry in the middle of the podcast. But like, the idea that like in recovery you show up day after day, that's an act of faith. And like writing is an act of faith, and sort of doing anything creative is an act of faith. And like, you guys made this movie with like 3 completely unknown actors. You didn't have any money. You didn't have like, you cobbled together this team that showed up every day and made this movie. And like, the movie works. Like the movie, it's a great movie. It's available on iTunes.
Amazon Prime.
Amazon. We can use your revenue. But I mean, in some weird way, like, I don't know. My perception is like that movie didn't actually change the trajectory of your career, but in some ways it did.
It did completely.
And how do you, because to me, from as an outsider's point of view, it's like that act of faith. It's like, you bow before your God, and your God delivers for reasons that don't make that don't necessarily, you're praying for this thing, and like he gives you this other thing, and you're like, what the fuck is that for? And, you know, it kind of, from the outside, it looks that way. Like, oh, you made this movie. And like...
Well, addiction, to me, you know, I had a friend, his name's Jim. I don't know. I think he's still alive. He's old. He would have, if he's, you know, when I knew him, he had 50 years. He was well known and probably has 56 now.
Right.
And his takeaway from 56 years of sobriety about what this thing's really about was like, he was like, it comes down to only one thing, all of the whole thing for me after 56 years. Am I a victim or am I not a victim? Like, is life happening to me or am I able to say I'm equal to life or happening to life? You know what I mean? Or is shit just, oh, fuck, this is happening to me. And I think that's a big part.
What's the answer?
I think he was saying he's not, you know what I mean? He was saying victim is like the whole poor me, you know what I mean? And so in the end, you know, to in the face of all of that no and all of that self-doubt and without the subjective world confirming value and validity, you know, with no one going, yes, you're good. Yes, here we'll help you do it, in the face of just a gale of no, to go out every day and go, we're going to tell the story because we have a take and we know what it is, and we don't really know how to make a movie and to direct a movie, which, I mean, there's also a childlike nature to the addict's mindset. And that was our take about addiction. But you have to be an adult to direct a movie because you're in charge. You know what I mean? Or you could be a crazy brat of an adult. I'm sure like lots of people are. But for me to show up for myself and go, I'm worth showing up for. And like, this matters enough for me to like be in charge and see this through and finish it, changed my entire sense of everything.
Do you think it changed? I mean, you know, can we talk about what you're doing now? I mean, you just wrote the new GRINCH movie that's coming out in December and
in November. I don't think. I mean, the only reason it had to help with that was because it just made, like, you know, I had a thing, I think, where I was going, hey man, I'm got talent. I'm worth something. I was like, you know, I'm a younger brother. My brother was a very successful producer. I always grew up sort of, you know, having to, like, as a crazy, wild kid who had talent, but hey, take me serious, you know, hey, you know, and I'm a drug addict. And so it just calmed me the fuck down to have done something, have it work. And look, no one's seen the movie. It's not successful. Some people may like it, some people don't. But to my idea, you know, it took 4 years and I stuck with it and I learned what it was to make the thing. I put a lot of sort of theories and things I'd been thinking about for a long time to the test. But it was a confirmation of a certain kind of adulthood and a certain kind of competency that just chilled me out. And also allowed me to go, that's a real piece of self-expression. So if you need me to write you a commercial movie, my sense of myself is not involved. Let me just be of service to you. You know what I mean? I didn't have to sort of try to get my identity out of a Dr. Seuss movie.
And how could you? I mean, that's probably ultimately the...
And you still put your piece of yourself in it, but I'm talking about the emotional state. You know what I mean? Because it's got a lot of me and all the things I do.
Of course. But
so that was a big blessing, but it was a big, you're right. It was a super sober thing to do, which was with not just no guarantee of success or decency or it working, but with nobody going, here. Here's a check. Now you've got an expectation. When people have expectations of me, I'm usually able to show up. You hired me. I better do this or I'll get in trouble. But
it's your relationship with your mom playing out in your career.
Exactly. But to do it for no other reason than you must tell a story or it means it. That's sort of the anti-junkie behavior, anti-addict behavior.
I mean, I woke up this morning. I went to an AA meeting, but before I got to the meeting, I was in a panic. I said in the meeting that I feel like I'm running through I'm sprinting through the forest and it's on fire and I'm just trying to get out before all the trees collapse on me.
What's the fire and what is it?
Fucking crap. I have no idea. I was like, I can't get out of bed. And then like, I heard the garbage truck on my street and I was like, fuck, I have to get out of bed because if I don't bring the garbage out, then the garbage isn't going to get picked up. My wife is going to yell at me. I'm going to hate myself. And like, I got the garbage out there and I was like, oh, it's a beautiful morning. and I was momentarily relieved of all of that like insanity. And like, you know, and that's just like the lesson of showing up. Like if you can overcome that, like that inhibition and that self-loathing that tells you that you're better served lying in bed, you're better served, you know, feeding yourself drugs, you're better served just dying.
Right.
You know, if you can overcome that to just like take a fucking step to do something, you're like, oh wow, I have a little bit of self-worth.
Right.
You know?
I go through that every morning.
Every morning. I wake up every morning and I have this thought, it's like a headline because I'm also have, you know, grandiose ideas about myself. And the headline always reads, Nick Morton put a bullet in his head. And, you know, not that would, I mean, I'm too afraid of guns and shit to kill myself that way. But like, I definitely like, it does a bullet to my head feels like relief. Okay. So the idea I had when I mean, this has already been better than I ever expected. So like, but you know, in my mind, when I was thinking about this idea, like I just was like, people tell these stories and I'm like, I want to interrupt them to ask them questions. So here are some of the things I jotted down when you were talking. Like, it's interesting because you said like when you talked about drugs and smoking pot that like you found your identity as like a drug guy. Like that was your identity. That was like so where you belonged in the world. And you know, it seems like you've now found an identity that you're comfortable with too, which is this someone who is a creative force who really has something to say. And I wonder if in the between time, were there other identities that felt like, were you ever like, this works for me?
No.
And
the truth is I never really had problems with identity. They just were always I think identity is even the wrong word. What it gave me was a kind of interesting career to both be unique and self-loathing and self-destructive at the same time.
Right.
Like I really think of heroin addiction specifically. I mean, the pot thing was just, you know, I was stony and whatever and fuck everybody and being rebellious. But heroin addiction really is a radical, like people will say, hey, all the time you'll hear people in life going, hey, you know, other kinds of addicts, even regular people, hey, I wasn't shooting heroin in my arm.
Right.
That's like the be-all, end-all.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Of like the worst, like the craziest thing you can do. So if you're a radical person, you know, I've always felt comfort and safety in going, here, I'm going to put myself into sort of the most radical, graphic place I can and sort of, and then from there I'm safe because what can you really say at that point to me?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, it's all the way done. So heroin addiction sort of gives you this radical identity and lets you kind of go, fuck you to the world and fuck you to yourself at the same time, which is like a perfect storm for an addict. You know what I mean? You get everything you could ever want out of that combination.
Right.
You know what
it's
I mean?
funny because it's also a little bit like the same level of like letting go that you have to find for peace in sobriety. Because
it's complete submission.
Yeah, you've destroyed everything on some level,
and
it's
like
just
tells you. I mean, I said, the one time in the thing, one of my things I really understood that about that particular addiction for me was because it went through your system like it did and you'd get sick.
Right.
Was it structured your life. And if you were a person who had trouble with structure,
Right.
it was such a great structure for your life. It told you what to do. You never had to think. It told you what to do at every minute, man. So, if you don't know how to structure your time, it'll do it for you. It'll just do it to your own death and demise and darkness. But hey, we all need structure, so you'll take what you can get. You know what I mean? Until you finally, the biggest thing I would say, more than I've gotten any kind of success. That was a byproduct, and I don't even relate to it that much. I'm happy about it to be able to make a living a little bit, but I know how to structure my time finally.
Yeah.
Like I wake up and I go to a coffee shop and I write, or I wake up and I take more actions that make me feel good than that make me feel bad. Or that I'm under the illusion that make me feel good, but end up making me feel bad.
Right.
That's the shift. I actually do things now more than I do more things that help me than hurt me.
Let me ask you something. I feel like one of the great sales tools of AA in particular is this phrase, fear of economic uncertainty will, I don't know, go away or something. Like, have you experienced that fear is gone?
Well,
even though you have you've got some economic stability, but the fear.
Yeah. But it's not. The truth is, I learned how to live on very meager means, and so. I don't.
Are you still living in the same place
when
you were
I still live in the same place.
So you've got this dough rolling in, but you're still.
Yeah, I'm sure if the gig went away, I could be financially. I don't go. Let me be honest about it. I don't go to many AA meetings anymore. Although I do like them.
We miss you.
Well, thank you. When I go, but I think I have just a sort of, I don't know what it is. I just, it's a little, it's not there's anything wrong with it. It's just I get around that many people saying that many similar things, or sort of a common belief. Like I don't always enjoy it so much anymore, but I do carry it with me, and I do consider all the people I know are in programs of one kind or another.
Yeah.
Everyone, my sponsor is a big part of my life. I call them. It changed my life, and I sort of live my life out of the principles.
Those guys, you met those guys in A Thousand Junkies.
Yeah, exactly.
Was that an AA meeting or was that an NA meeting?
Yeah, that was an AA meeting.
Is there like an NA world in LA?
I say, I have this. Yeah, there is an NA world, but and not to be crude, but as I say, I have a line in a book I wrote that goes, NA went to prison, AA went to college.
That's pretty funny.
So Hollywood NA it's great. It's just wild, man. It's just wild.
I'm so sort of cynical about that sort of groupthink thing. I've always steered away from it. When I was in high school, I was anointed the biggest pot smoker in the 11th grade, and it came with like a bunch of trophies that you put in your room. It was an invitation to get thrown out of school, but somehow I didn't get thrown out of school. But the minute I was part of that club, I was like, I hate this club. It made me uneasy to have to live up to these other pot smokers' expectations. Right. And I was sort of discovering at that point that really I just wanted to drink. I just wanted to get fucking blotto on vodka. Right. That was really just peace. But the way people talk about AA, I always figured that going to AA was some sort of erotic experience. I figured there must be something everyone you must literally get a boner from being in there, but you don't. There's nothing erotic about that experience, but I do find it reminds me to be grateful, and I forget that, and that's sometimes that's enough to just keep me through the day. All right, so where are you eating this kosher spaghetti?
In Cedars-Sinai.
Why is it kosher spaghetti?
Because you can order, the kosher meals are better. So you order
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Little tip for anybody going to the hospital.
And then, the ulcer, it's in your stomach.
Yeah.
It's right.
I'm bleeding. I mean, to be graphic, I'm bleeding out my ass.
Yeah.
Bleeding to death.
I've been there.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, when I was in high school, I drank a hole in my stomach, and
Right.
like I know,
Oof.
it is a particular thing to have blood coming out.
Yeah,
of
it is.
It is like you never forget the smell. Frankly,
Right.
I hate to be gross about it.
Right.
And then when you're on methadone, like how does that feel compared to sobriety or compared to heroin?
Well, compared to heroin, it's just sort of, you're not living that life, but you're pretty spaced out. You're not high like you are on dope, and you're not shooting up. So, because the shooting up becomes as big a drug.
Right.
The self-mutilation, especially with me and what becomes as big a high. It becomes like cutting, I think, a little bit.
Well, and also, in your movie, you talk about like the inordinate amount of time that you spend trying to score, and I guess when you're on methadone, you're no longer trying to score. You're just
I was taking like occasional benzos, but I mean, obviously that real thing. But the amazing thing about methadone, I remember, is 1 milligram is a huge amount. Even when you're on 1 milligram, the difference between that and being on none is incredibly huge. You know what I mean? And it was a slow kick, but it's just amazing also in terms of getting clean. Like, I wanted to get clean, and I was on 5 milligrams, and I went to Brotman for a week.
And do they like strap you down in there?
No,
I mean, how they just kind of reduce it slowly, or all right at once?
And I got off, and I was sick for a month, but like I had program, I had friends, and I was ready, and I wanted to, and that was like one of the great AA things that I really believe that I, the slogans I like is, if you're not ready, no one can say the right thing. And if you are, no one can say the wrong thing. You know what I mean? It's
fucking true.
It's the fucking truth. And the other good AA thing I was thinking about recently is, thank God we get mercy and not justice.
Yeah. It's amazing how much mercy you get. Like, sometimes I'm sitting in that room, and I know that you're not that into that room, but like, whatever.
No, I like that room. The Friday room?
No, I mean, just any of the rooms.
Meeting. I like
any of the rooms, because it's like they all have different things that make them
I like that
interesting.
Meeting.
I mean, that meeting, I've met just some of like I used to laugh that like, I meet like more talented Hollywood people in those like people who would not return my fucking call.
Right.
Will help me patch my life back together,
Right.
And that's, I don't know, that's kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, I also like AA because it's the one program that I'll go to the meetings and I'm actually able to do what I'm supposed to be doing, as opposed to other programs. Right? I'm like, I'm not allowed to do this.
I look at the other programs, like fucking sex addiction or
debtors,
like fucking debtors and overeaters, and I'm like, how do you? I mean, at least this you just like stop,
right?
And then you can feel good about yourself. Like, I spent 4 hours looking at pornography last night, but I wasn't using. So hey, I'm cool.
But it's great. I mean, the great thing about like, if you, whatever you deal with AA, however you feel about whether you go or not, and I think it's true what that guy Jim said, and the victim or whatever, but just the idea of sort of going, when it comes down to it, the whole what's my part, you know what I mean, and sort of that part of the program is so, it's just makes you not at the mercy of the world. What I mean? It's just so great. I mean, or if you are at the mercy of the world in the right way, right? You're at you're not in control. But you're not at the mercy of it. It's not this poor done to, and and people aren't killing you.
Right.
I mean, it's just a great. It's really interesting, I mean, and it's like funny. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who was talking about when you do your character defects, and why is it so defect obsessed and not asset obsessed, and why don't you also take inventory of where you're right and always why you're wrong? And I think it's because it's just alcoholics are just naturally arrogant, weird people. I mean, I wonder why. It was all. It's interesting when you think about what they came up with, sort of being pre-self-help, pre-affirmation, very religious, very like, I don't think they would invent the same steps today. I don't think they would be phrased the same way. You know what I mean? I don't think the words would be exactly the same. There
God,
would probably,
I fucking hope not.
Yeah. It would probably be more of a kind of a different kind of consciousness. There's something very religious, about,
yeah, I mean, there's a very like dogmatic kind of like that. Certainly, the language is, it's almost like a, it's. I was gonna say it's Old Testament, but that's not really correct because it's very New Testament too.
Right.
But it's, but it does have this like sort of 50s religiosity about it. That's,
And it's just sort of, there's a Buddhist expression, drive all blames into one, which means like just take everything onto yourself. And there is that part of it, which is in the end sort of, it's just endlessly going self-responsibility. Because alcoholics, I'm sure, that's just like, it's like Iceman cometh, it's like sitting around the bar complaining about the world.
I mean, I love this idea of victimhood versus what's the opposite?
I don't know. What would the opposite be of victimhood versus not being a victim?
Yeah, being like active participant or something.
Exactly.
And like sometimes I wish that that long list of obligations that feels so sort of daunting and overwhelming to me just felt like a joyous little thing I was going to conquer. And like sometimes I can conjure up that fantasy and it's better. Like I'm going to put these things on my calendar because I know like that's what I have to do. Right. Otherwise I'm never going to show up for them. And
it is what you said about waking up and taking the difference between what your head is telling you as you open your eyes and what your psyche feels like after you've taken the first action of the day is so insane. You know what I mean? It's so incredible, man.
All right. There was one more note I saw on my list here, which was just Spielberg. What was the project that you were,
So when I was working, the funny thing about Spielberg was I was on methadone when I was there. I had a little respite in like 1994, I think it was. 93, working on Little Giants. And we're AA, Showbiz AA, where it's pre-email, I think, or
yeah.
So we're pre-email.
Yeah, crazy, right?
So we're he likes the first thing we do. We get hired on a weekly back when they paid you weekly money,
man.
And then he calls us up and he goes, "Do you guys have any real talent?" And we go over there, and my partner's talking to him, and I leave, and I just go, I'm going to write a scene. And I just write a scene where the girl and Rick Moranis' character ultimately are going on a picnic that we're
right.
Right.
Spielberg
calls me that night or something from his beach house. Says, "Oh, that was good." He's very interesting. He's very hands-on. But I got so anxious during that shoot. I was walking around just clutching my neck. Like it got to me.
What did he say when he called you?
On the phone?
Yeah.
He just said those are good. I mean,
he's like, "Oh, you do have talent."
Yeah, I mean, basically.
Right.
He's very writer, It was weird, man. It was all I the one story I'll tell, like the one Showbiz story that was mind-blowing to me was he won all those awards, Academy Awards for Schindler's List, and then came in 9 a.m. the next morning for a Little Giants story meeting.
Right.
Where he was the fucking producer. I was like, oh.
Right.
This guy's insane.
Yeah, right. It's like, I'm like, part of me is like, that's totally healthy. Like, on to the next thing. Like, what else are you going to do? It's all falling apart anyway.
Right, exactly.
And then part of me is like, jeez, like, let it go, dude.
Right, exactly.
Relax.
Yeah.
Get a massage. All right. Spielberg's there was one other thing.
What?
On my,
he's the penultimate?
Well, whatever. I just started thinking about the notes that I made. It might, who knows? Maybe we'll cut out of this after the first 20 minutes because it was so interesting. But like,
definitely getting longer now. But you can edit.
Yeah, but it's I don't really want to edit this. I hope I never, just because I'm lazy. But the shooting into the wound, that's sort of like just on like a technical
Oh, a technical, not a metaphoric level?
Yeah. No, I mean, maybe we'll find something metaphorical in the exploration of it.
It simply was like open flesh, and if for whatever reason, it felt like you were shooting up in a vein. Like the wound, there was enough of exposed blood vessels or whatever, it gave
that your body would absorb it.
In that quick way.
And like when you're shooting, like I never got a chance to do heroin.
Right.
I was invited to do it by these two sort of crazy girls I went to college with who were like super sexy, and I was in love with both of them.
Right.
And at different times, and like neither of them were the least bit interested in me. I mean, I feel like I could see in their eyes just one thought: he has a small penis. Like that's all they saw when they looked at me. But they were partiers, and like they introduced me to coke when I was in college. I'd been doing like booze and LSD and stuff, but like coke was a different kind of drug. And they called me and invited me to do heroin with them, but I was asleep and I missed the call. I didn't get it till later that night, and they said they both had like a miserable time. They just like sat on the toilet the whole time.
Right.
But so when you're that's a preview of explaining why I don't know anything about shooting drugs. And so if you miss the vein, which we talk about in the movie, you guys are talking about a lot in the movie, like can you can tell that you've missed the vein?
Yeah.
Because you can feel it on the needle, or you can feel it in your body.
Well, no. First of all, it blows up.
Oh,
it hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, because it doesn't want to be in there. And second of all, you can't, when it doesn't, what happens is you get blood in the needle.
Right. So that's how you know.
So sometimes you'll miss because you're like, got the thing out to the, the vein. Right. You got most of the needle out. I mean, there's a lot of art to it, but yes, you can miss. And also you can muscle the shit, but like people don't shoot in veins, and that's its own.
And how because like when
I muscled it here and I have this mark from an abscess, I have to have a surgery. I mean,
yeah, because like when they give me the flu vaccination, they're not looking for a vein. They're just like stick it in me somewhere.
It's filthy. I mean, especially black tar, So
so you want it in your vein or you don't?
You do, know, as opposed to because it'll just get circulated in the blood, as opposed to being like just a big bunch of poison running through. I mean,
at least your body will sort of filter it out.
There are times when I think about it. I was saying to TJ, I've said to him, I said it's like it's one thing to go to the CVS and buy a bottle of booze, and go home and pour a glass. To have to call a guy, meet him in some fucking weird ass neighborhood in an hour, give him a bunch of money, take the shit you've bought illegally in some weird place home, put it in a spoon, get a medical syringe, cook it, pull it up through a fucking cotton, and then shoot it into your body.
What's the cotton for?
To get the impurities out.
Oh, right.
I mean, it's just such a radical thing to do. It's just so serious. What a thing to do. I mean, it's got so many steps to it. It's like it ain't just a simple thing. It's so major, man.
When I would buy coke, generally, you go on some, there's some little adventure involved in going to get coke, and usually you're fucking having fun and it doesn't really matter, and there was a rush to it. Like I would be as gacked up from the excitement of getting the coke as finally fucking doing it. Right. I suppose as a heroin addict that goes away. Like there isn't that same, though in the
no, there is.
There's the hunt remains fun.
Well, it's the movie, like that's the big thing about it is how viscerally compelling sickness and wellness and the desperation. Yes, it can get boring, but it's sort of endlessly. That's what we were trying to show, that it was kind of life and death exciting, like being in battle. You know what I mean, as opposed to being dull like drinking is, because drinking is just it's not as much of a quest and to get it and all that stuff. But in general the thing that really keeps you going is how sick you get when you don't have it.
So the other thing you talked about a lot was just like how long it took you to, if you hadn't gotten sick, do you think you ever would have kicked? No.
I don't know. I don't. Yeah. I mean, I would have just died. I mean, it's also radical, you know. I mean, just the idea of a drug, like you can drink yourself to death, but it's not drink like shot to shot glass of like this is the shot glass. Like there's always a chance I'm going to die from this shot of bourbon. I mean, the idea that you would just shoot drugs in your body that are famous for killing people. And it's just it's a radical, it's a real mindset of sort of it's to me it's sort of the ultimate, it's the ultimate. I mean, the devil could never have come up with anything better than that, than something that at first feels so good that makes you physically addicted and that you have to have and runs through your body like sand. I mean, it's just like sand through an hourglass. I mean, it's just crazy. It's just such an interesting, it's such a great way to hate yourself. You know, it's such a perfect, like I said, to both feel like you're sort of rebellious and self-loathing. It is the height of delusion. You know what I mean? That's the painful thing about it.
Yeah, but I mean, the crazy
level
thing,
of delusional of how. And the way it takes over your life, man. And I'm sure drinking does too. It's interesting. Like, you know, I wrote that piece about Bourdain that some people really like. Some people really got pissed about.
No, I thought. I mean, it made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, got pissed about. But the interesting thing about him is just the vengeance. Like, and he might be just doing it for the show. But the way he talks about booze, that one where he's in South America and he gets 10 of these drinks. You know what I mean? Just the idea of the way someone who's serious about their drugs does them. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I mean, that's a radical thing. And there's one where him and Darren Aronofsky pull over in like some Buddhist thing and make this alcohol out of something. I mean, it's like your 16-year-old kids with their bomb.
Love that shit. I mean, I definitely, when I was drinking and doing drugs, you know, it was like, I always felt like there was a difference between the way I did it and the way other people, I did it, you know, it was sacred to me, you know, there was a ritualism to it. And there was, you know, I was looking for God.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas other people were just like, whatever, being
right. And that
silly.
was a big thing of our thing, was like, it really is a misguided looking for love, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, but I mean, I guess that's the ultimate challenge is once the chemicals are gone and you're just left with the crazy chemicals. Right. Bouncing around in your noggin, like
those are some strong chemicals.
You're still fucking, you know, looking for God.
Exactly. And I get really high on like a good paragraph. You know what I mean? I get ripped.
Sure.
My brain chemicals and despondent when I don't understand it.
All right. Well, hey, thanks very much for coming in. That was really great. I'm excited. Like, this is one in the can, and I think it's a good one. So we'll see what happens next. Hey, so if you've been enjoying this podcast, you can head over to my Patreon page and feel completely free to support the show with a modest contribution at www.patreon.com/thedrunkalogs.